Crap on it. I've never seen it like that. All right, good evening. I'd like to call this joint meeting of the Board of Selectmen and Kennebunk Port Budget Board to order on March 16th at 6:01 PM. So I call the Board of Selectmen to order.
And you need to recognize that Mike West.
Oh, yes, Mike Weston is out in the ether this evening, so he is not here with us at the table, but he is with us online this evening.
And you're going to verify that he can hear and
Can you hear us, Mike?
I can.
All right, welcome.
Yeah, loud and
I'm
clear.
I'm with the dolphins and the manatees.
Huh? I saw a manatee when I was in Florida,
Rub it in, Mike.
but now I'm here. April, would you call the budget board?
I will. I'd call the budget board to order. We have 4, 5, 6, 8 people here. One is coming on the way, and we have one on Zoom.
And can we confirm that we can hear Dave? And
David
can hear us?
James is on Zoom.
David James, can you
Yes.
acknowledge you're here?
I am there. Can you hear me? I am there.
We can hear you.
Before we go on, could we approve our minutes from last week?
Motion to approve. Second.
All those in favor? Thank you.
Okay, well, let's get this party started. Lori, who is our first presenter this evening?
Well, first, we're going to give you a couple of overview slides.
Okay.
On tonight, we are going to review the Capitol as well as all other agencies, anyone we haven't covered yet in the budget. So, Dave, can you move forward?
You're fine.
It's not showing up here.
There it is.
In January, the department directors and I presented a capital improvement plan to the Board of Selectmen. So you can see that from FY '24 to '28, it's a 5-year capital improvement plan. It totaled just over $37 million. And you can see by this slide how that's broken up by department. Can you move forward, Dave? And then this slide shows you how it is broken up by funding source. So some of these are funded through the budget, some are projected to probably be bond issues, some are funded through reserve funds, and others through grant and trust funds. Again, this is a plan and not a budget. So more specifically for FY '24, we had a capital improvement plan projection of about $7.2 million. Out of that, approximately $4.6 million is planned from grants and reserves. Some of the larger pieces of that are, for example, the Pier Road Causeway project, which was a $2.6 million grant. We also have reserve funds, so like, for example, our funding on the Goose Rocks Beach replacement ladder truck. That is about $1 million in reserves and about $500,000 in a lease. So what that left was about $2.5 million that would come from the general fund budget. As you can see in your budget here, that was only $2.2 million in actual funding. So that from the plan, it was further reduced. Can you go to the next slide? Here's where we can see the 2.535 was from grant. We had some from budget, but that budget includes wastewater as well as general fund, and we're here tonight to just talk about the general fund, and some coming from reserves and trust funds. So the next slide. So overall, we have 2.2 million in the general fund budget, which is up about 60,000 from last year. So we are going to go to the next slide, and Tracy's the first one to talk about records preservation.
Good evening. So I am here to talk about records preservation, as Lori said. One of the most important parts of the town clerk position is being the custodian of the town records, and it's my responsibility to make sure that those records stay safe and they're archived for future use. We have records that go back hundreds of years, and we like to keep them available for the future as well. So we use the same company each year. It's CoFile, and they're out of Vermont, so they're a New England company. And they take our books, and this is one of the old books that they took and refurbished, just to show you the condition that some of these old books are in. And this is actually a pretty good one, but it was the only one that I had that I could bring tonight. So they take our books from us, they disassemble the books, they clean each sheet individually and deacidify it and mend it in a lab so that it's all safe and there's no chance of anything being damaged. They remove all of the adhesives and non-archival materials. A lot of the old pages have Scotch tape on them, which, as you know, over time, Scotch tape deteriorates very badly and turns yellow and starts to fall off. So they take all of that off, they clean the pages, and then the sheets are encapsulated in archival polyester and then placed in custom binders that are, they don't have the binding like this. They're hooked in with screws so that it's easy to remove a certain page if you need to make a copy, whereas these books, you try to lay them flat and it damages the pages. So that is what I'm asking for this year in the budget. We usually do 5,000. We bumped it up a little bit this year because everything is going up, and we're hoping to finish these old record books, and then we'll move on to the valuation books. So does anybody have any questions? Okay, well then I'm gonna.
Dan, did you have a question?
Where are we in the total business of redoing them?
So we've done all the vital records, which is good because those are the most important. And we have 3 of these meeting books left. And these books contain the old warrants and the old meeting minutes and town meeting minutes and election results and all of that. So we have 3 more of these to do, and then after that, we have the valuation books that we are gonna move on to. So there's always something to redo.
But will the proposed budget for this year do the 3 books?
No, it'll probably do 2 books, and then we'll have to finish the last one next year.
Why not go for 3?
Well, because we have to stay within our budget. We would love to, but, you know, we do what we can with, tell them how much money we have, and they're really good at making sure that we get whole books done, and they work with us, and they're a great company.
Okay.
Tracy, what are we doing now with our modern, current books to make sure that we don't have to preserve them down the line? Are they,
So vital records are now, we don't get printed copies anymore. The state has a computer system that we go on to pull the records. So we aren't receiving any more vital records, so those are done. And as for these books, we're just using better paper and just taking better care of them. And, if we want them to last a few hundred more years, we probably at some point should put them in archival folders. But for now, we're just focusing on the really old ones that we're trying to keep from deteriorating further.
great, thank you.
You're welcome. Anybody else? All right, well, I'm going to segue on to Yanina, and she will take care of the website.
Hello, everyone. Yanina Nicholas, Special Projects Manager. So one of the projects that we are hoping to start and finish next year would be updating our website. So the current website that we have was implemented in 2015, which was almost 8 years ago. And before COVID, 8 years seemed like a reasonable time, so websites could be up to 10, 15 years. But as you all know, during COVID, IT and technology started developing rapidly, and a lot of things changed fast. And I don't know about you, but now when I go on any restaurant's website, I'm hoping to see this order online button. It's just something I hope to do. And I think there is the same expectation from our community about our website. We did send out a survey to the citizens, business owners, our employees, and asked just general ideas about our website. And here's just a little bit of feedback we got. So somebody said it was overwhelming, not well organized. It doesn't have a good search option. It is not user-friendly. It's a little cluttered, and it's difficult to navigate through. So we try to approach this project from 2 different sides. One, we are trying to do the best we can with the current website. So my team is going through our whole website and cleaning it up and making sure that the information we have is current and up to date. But then we approached it from the other side and started looking into maybe we need a new website that this town deserves. So can you please go to the next slide? We looked into site views analytics. And if you will see on this graph, we traced it back to 2016. And in 2016, we had about 160,000 views on the website. And then you can see that in 2022, it basically tripled. And now we have about 340,000 people visiting our website. You might see a little bump in 2018, and that is because there are 2 reasons for it. One, we implemented online application on our website, so people could now go online to our website and send their application through the website directly. And also due to flooding maps, I believe, through the codes. Can you please go next, Dave? So what we are proposing is this process for upgrading our website. Well, step 1 would be creating a community survey, which we've done, and we are still waiting for more answers because I believe we received about 80 answers so far, which is not a lot for our community, but it was very helpful. Step 2 would be gathering data, processing it, and writing RFP, and we would hope for some help from the community, but we are just not there yet. And then we would hope to send it out and see if we can find any vendors and what would be the proposals and what would they can offer. And step 4 would be implementing a new website for better communication with our citizens. So thus, the money we're asking is $15,000 for next year.
What's the timeline, you know? What does this mean time-wise? When do you expect to hope to have the website?
So I would say, depending on, this budget process, we would hope to have it by the end of next fiscal year, basically. Because just for you to understand the process, it takes about 5-6 months to implement a whole new website. If we would go with a whole new website, it would be about 5-6 months for them just creating it. We would go through the process, everything we want. We would talk to designers. We would talk to IT coders. So the whole process would take about that long. So for us to, gather data, write RFP, choose a vendor, I would assume that would take another few months.
So 12 to 15 months, is that?
I would say so. And there are different options, of course. As I said, it really depends on the budget process and community involvement.
And we have been talking to some website vendors currently. We've done some demonstrations, looked at a variety of other municipalities, and tried to hone in on what is most important.
Yes, so as Laura mentioned, there are quite a lot of nearby communities that updated their website. Actually, Old Dodger just launched a new website March 11th. Other like Saco, Kennebunk, if they are not, they already had updated websites, higher level and tier than ours, but they are adding more add-ons to the website. So it just kind of seems like we're a little behind in this process. That's why we had few committees that try to see what we need for the website, what we need for vendors, but our committee was more gathered from employees, and we want more of a community committee because we would do it for the community. So we want to And this is a wonderful tool, and actually our communications specialist found that tool and implemented it, started looking into it. One way we approached this project was we looked into how people search things on the website. You actually can trace all of the clicks that people made to get to a certain page, which was very useful for us to find out, like, oh, there was so many clicks. It could have been shorter, or that's how we're cleaning it now. But that's how we will go forward with it, and we will look into that tool, because basically everyone, in that program are our current citizens.
Do we know how people are accessing the website, Yanina?
Yeah.
Mobile versus PC?
Yeah, so we actually did look into, we asked it on the survey, and most of the people are looking at it through their computers, yeah.
Because
through their
to
PC.
me, that makes a difference. I just soon throw this thing overboard as look at some websites,
Yeah.
as opposed to, I much prefer to use my PC. I find that the navigation is much easier.
Yeah, I believe 60% was
Okay.
using their computers.
But that's age relative too.
It is.
The younger the person is, the more they're gonna want to use mobile.
Oh, absolutely. My daughter doesn't even have a computer.
Right.
And she's Yanina's age. Yeah, they don't, I mean, and I don't mean
And-
anything, but this is what they grew up with, whereas, we didn't even barely had computers.
So maybe the second go around, when you do it again, you'll put a mobile website in place, which is again, a different layout,
Yep.
different design.
Well, we're looking at both with any vendor. We look at both and see how that they arrange it and how visible it is on the phone versus the computer. We want to make sure it works in both scenarios.
That's
Because
right.
you're right, people are changing. I mean, in the short time since COVID, I'll tell you that the number of people I know in town with our demographic are accessing things. You can see it on our web survey results that we're doing, even just the Climate Action Plan one, or the Conservation Commission one that we did mostly through the website versus a few years ago, which was all paper-driven.
Any decent vendor will make sure that it's mobile compatible.
Exactly.
Yes, and that's what I wanted to add too, that the vendors we've talked to, it seems they all just, it's more of a natural thing for them to have. It's not even a request anymore, they have it. Yeah.
But you're absolutely right, Yanina, and I'll make this my last statement is, I've been on that website several times, and it is not a very good website.
Yeah.
It is not easy to navigate, and.
And we're trying to clean up the best we
But
can.
you didn't make it. I'm not,
using-
no, I think you're absolutely on the right track, and you have my full support to clean that up,
Thank you.
so.
I never had any trouble.
Thank you, Yanina.
Thank you very much, everyone. Okay.
Next, we have Chief Sanford to talk about the police and communications capital.
Can I ask one question that is in?
Can you speak into your microphone, Carol, so folks at home can hear? Thank you.
I noticed in going through these capital budgets, and this is probably something that I should know, but I don't. A lot of them show transfer out. And I didn't know if that was because some money was being used out of a reserve account, or what does transfer out mean?
So does our finance director want to answer that question? What, she's talking about in the budget line item. So when you look at the budget detail, what we do is we keep the capital funds because they transfer from year to year in a separate fund. So what you're seeing is the transfer of the funds out to the capital fund, and then they're retained year after year in there. So if there's a balance, it's maintained.
Somebody didn't spend all their money.
No, it doesn't matter
No.
whether you've spent your money or not.
We don't want you to spend all your
At the
money.
beginning of the year, those are capital funds are transferred to the capital fund, and then the expenditures come out of the capital fund.
And then one of the other things that I noticed, and this goes back to something that Mary Beth brought up a few weeks ago, there are several instances where it shows the 22 budget, and then it shows the 22 actual, and the 22 actual was 0. And then the 23 budget and the amount spent to date is 0. So I think it would be helpful if the department heads could maybe mention what their plan is with the money that's there.
So.
For the rest of this
Well,
year.
it says 0 in the capital funds because they're in the capital funds and they're expended out of there. I would say, police, for example, so administration has 0 capital funds left. Police has 0 capital funds left. I would say Parks and Rec has a balance. But we'll talk about that when we get there.
I have some capital funds left over, but they're
To-
part
yes.
of this budget.
For part of the vehicle equipment
Yes.
replacement.
So, to start out with us, the first picture you see there is a grinder pump. So this grinder pump is part of the septic system or sanitation system. It takes the raw sewage from the nurse's office and pumps it into that barrel, grinds it up, and then eventually shoots it into the septic system. It has failed twice because it's original, and we have had to clean up raw sewage a couple of times, which is not pleasant. And we were told the last time that we need to get that replaced. So that's why that is on there now. And the hard drive, that is a system for the in-car camera systems for the cruisers. So everything is recorded that we do in the cruiser, and the officers have a mic pack, and they can record certain situations. And all of that is, requires a lot of storage, and it's automatically downloaded onto the server when they drive into the PD. That is original. It was here when I got here, and it's no longer supported by Windows 98. And the company was surprised that it's still running as good as it is, and we need to get that replaced. We should have replaced it a couple of years ago. I should mention that these funds are going to, hopefully, we're gonna be able to use pick-a-vit money to pay for it, so, but we wanted you to know that that is a capital item that we need this year. Next slide, please. And as always, you know, I have to replace a police cruiser. We're gonna replace a 2016 old Dodge Charger that we have. Dodge is no longer going to make the police Charger, as far as I've been told. So we are going to use some leftover capital funds and this $41,000 to replace that car. The reason that I had leftover capital monies is because we had budgeted for hybrid vehicles, and I couldn't get those hybrid vehicles and they are significantly more. So I have a little bit of money left over to be able to even that out, because just to swap over a car, it costs close to $6,000 to take the equipment out and put it back in. So it's quite a significant amount. They're starting to look like jet fighters, the cockpits of these cruisers. So that's what that item is for. Do I have another item? I do. So this next item, as you can see in the eaves of the police station and the nurses station, we're getting some significant rot, even though I had it painted a few years ago. That needs to be replaced, and I don't know how spongy it gets either side. If we don't get it replaced, the water's gonna start running into the station and down the walls and create even more issues. And you can see there's some gutters that need to be replaced as well, and that's, you know, that's a rough estimate, and I'm hoping it's not gonna cost more than that, but hopefully we can replace that stuff with PVC, and we don't have to go revert back to the old wood and have it rot again. So, any questions?
Thank you, Chief.
All right, thank you.
Good evening, everyone.
Hey, Jay.
So for the fire department, a couple of the things that we've been doing on our accounts is putting funds away each year for a large purchase. And so this would be, this $40,000 for SCBA replacement is part of year 5 of an 8-year plan. Currently, we need to be at about $320,000 at the end of it to replace our air packs, which is a manufacturer's recommendation, NFPA recommendation, to every 25 years. That's about the lifespan of the air pack. So we'll head to the next one. So looking at our fire apparatus reserve, we do the same thing. We put funds in to when we have to fund trucks in the future, so it's not a heavy hit. These are two of the next 2 trucks to be replaced. And I'm, again, estimating right at a cost right now of probably somewhere in the neighborhood of $1.7 million. So we're putting the 75 away for the last probably 3 years, it's been 175. 100 of that has gone now to the, pay for the ladder truck, the 5-year lease that we did to get to the finish line of the ladder truck before the prices have gone super crazy. But by doing this and then going back to somewhere in that neighborhood of, after 5 years at the 75, going back to somewhere in that neighborhood of the 175, we should be in good shape for replacing these trucks when the next chief has to do it. Go ahead to the next one. Again, this is something we do every year. We buy a certain amount of turnout gear. I have a rotation where, you know, for our interior people, I'm trying to replace it every 10 years or so. Our people that are only exterior qualified, their gear can last longer. And we recycle. If I give an interior person a brand new set of gear because their gear is 10 years old, I end up giving that gear to someone that's exterior. We don't trash it then, but, so buying 5 to 7 sets of gear, a year is what keeps us on a regular basis and tries to keep the price down as far as not having to go out and buy, 20 sets of gear at $3,200 a set. Next one, please. So this is about, the future, and looking to do renovations to this station in the eventuality of having to hire per diems. We obviously don't know when that might be, but, planning for it now and trying to get it going, because the next slide, please, Dave, will show a little bit of a timeline of if this, works out and the voters approve, that we're looking at in FY '26 of being done. Obviously, a big part of it is the town needs to be out of this space, because you can see the kind of purple area on the left is where we are right now, and that's would be what would be turning into office space in the renovation. We'd be adding a new bay and sleeping quarters as well. Again, this is for planning for the future. Go ahead to the last one. Yes.
So when you went through the per diem discussion last time we spoke,
Yep.
I was just a little confused at the end of it. Is this something, because it didn't sound like you were 100% in, that there was still some questions that you needed to iron out. So is this the answer that other communities are coming up with, or are there other options?
Yeah, unfortunately, it is, and the real unfortunate part is, once you ring that per diem bell, there's no going back. And history has shown in other departments, I'm not saying this one necessarily, but people responding will go down when that happens, because there's a little bit of, the per diems are working right now, so they'll take care of this. It does give the volunteer the flexibility to maybe pick and choose the calls that they decide to go on, but the numbers we'll probably see will go down on people coming out to calls. There are a couple other things that we could do, like the live-in program through the Southern Maine Community College. The problem for us there is the distance we are from the campus, so the kids would have to drive. And if we're giving them the place to stay and getting the coming to calls at night during the week type in return, we don't have the calls to generate the fuel they're going to spend and the food they're going to need to buy. We're just providing the place to live, but we're getting their response in return. So I don't know how attractive it might be to some kids that maybe don't, especially if they don't have their own set of wheels or something like that. But we could certainly look into it. But renovations like we just looked at obviously would need to happen first, because there's no facilities in this building for overnight stay.
But in your mind, in 2026, per diem will be what we're doing in the town?
It could be. I mean, I don't know, because it really, the number of factors I look at, and that's why my presentation on the operating budget had, when our calls are and how many people are coming and things like that, because that's what I use as kind of my bellwether to, I'm getting a little nervous that we don't have enough people. I think we're good right now, but unfortunately, we all know 6 months' time could be very different. But I don't think I need per diem employees in the budget, because they'd be here if I did. I think we're still good. It's just kind of looking at all those things and because again, pulling the trigger on it it has a negative as well. And personally, I want to keep this a community-based resource as absolutely long as we can, because the per diems tend to come from everywhere else. We're all fishing from the same pond for employees around here, and they live somewhere else. And so if they're not working and we have a big call, big fire, whatever, we usually don't see them. That's the other problem with going to per diem.
Thank you.
So this last one is funds to do a study between chems and fire, just to use as a roadmap to how we might be able to do things together better, and save money for both, that we're not duplicating effort. But also how the future goes if chems can't stay its own entity and needed to be absorbed by the fire department, or by the town, sorry. And this would help give us a roadmap to that. I'm not saying it's near there, but it's better to, I think, have a plan in place that we all can agree on. Before, and when we have the time to do it calmly and not under a huge time constraint, because, we need to figure this out in 60 days, something like that. And that's my capital. Yeah, Dan?
Can you speak into your microphone? Thank
You had a picture of 23 and the tanker. What's the situation on 13 and 12 as far as replacement?
So we've ordered a truck, an engine.
Right.
That will replace 12.
Okay.
13 will go away at that time unless something catastrophic happens to it, because it's not in the replacement plan.
Right.
And so by having these trucks on order, we're where we should be in the plan of replacing trucks. And 12 would end up probably being our spare engine for a while, just because we can lose ISO points for not having a spare.
Right.
So we would just use it when we absolutely needed to. Anything else? Yep.
Sorry, I don't have my phone. I'll try and speak up as loudly as possible. Just going back to the per diem conversation.
Yep.
Just thinking back to your presentation, average age of the volunteers now above 60, 55,
Yep.
multiple volunteers in their 70s or 80s. I mean, is 2026 a realistic amount of time before you think the per diem conversation's going to really come back up?
I think it is, because over the last couple of years, our numbers have gotten really good.
When we say really good compared to where they were.
Right, they've gone up over the last couple of years. This past year, so 2022, they dropped what I would say a little bit. It was three or four tenths of a person, which I've never met, but so again, it's hard to kind of fathom, but when I look at that, for the last 3 years, our numbers have been ticking down, maybe even whole numbers. That might be, okay, now is the time we really need to think about it. And I know that tonight and all this month and everything, we're trying to plan for something that's not going to end for a year from this July. But I do feel that we don't need to have that now. But
I think since Chief Everett has come here, he's done a great job at really analyzing that data. But I remember in FY 20 and 21, we sat in my office and had a very hard conversation about whether you were going to put per diems in the budget, because the numbers were very different. COVID did a lot of things fortunately, it did make people stay home and our numbers increased. And, once they got over being scared of getting COVID by going to someone's house. But I think that it did increase things and you have been able to attract a few.
Yeah.
But we are within, you know, a person or two of not meeting those numbers.
I just think about the demographics of the town.
Right, and that's the real problem is just that, the average age of the town is the same as what the fire department is. We're a great snapshot of the town that way, but also the people that want to do this, even at the per diem level, has been drying up.
Right.
You know, my plan in a perfect world would be, well, when we're gonna go per diem, I'm gonna hire our own people that are, been in the department already, that meet the qualifications they would need to have first, because, you know, they've been responding for all those years. But I wouldn't be able to, 2 people a day during the week is probably what we would start at. I can't see this department's personnel being able to fill all those spots. And then you have to go outside, and again, you never see them unless they're working. And that's a problem. And then with 2 of them on during the day, during the week, when you go back to the 2 in, 2 out rule, I still need 2 more to come from home. Or I have to wait for another town to get here with their crew before we could go in that building, and, you know, it's burning the entire time. So, but again, I think we're good. I don't want anyone to get, panicky or anything, but I think we're good for now, but, you know, it might be something that's in next year's budget or the year after, in 26's. I think it's certainly coming, but, you know, I'm trying to do everything I can, along with the men and women of this department, to keep that at bay as long as we can.
Sure. And we all appreciate you being fiscally responsible, but I think just all of us being aware that if it does come, don't be surprised, right?
Yeah, and that's most of the reason for giving you all those, you know, boring statistics, because that's what is driving the decision. And it'll be, in the end, too, you know, a gut feeling of mine, a comfort level of, geez, every time the bell rings, I'm not confident we're gonna get the crew. I am now, but that might change in the future.
Right.
Anything else? All right, thank you.
Thank you, Jay. Chris, I think you're up.
Hi, everyone. So in the capital request this year, the photo on the right is our current air compressor up at the highway garage. To the best of our institutional knowledge, that compressor is about 25 years old now, and very worn out. It runs excessive amounts of time now just to try to keep up with the air demand that we have. We use this to power our tire machine. We use it to run our air tools. We use it for a variety of different things, sandblasting when we need it. So we're looking to replace this year at a cost of about $4,500. Next slide, please. Also in the capital request this year, the picture on the left is our 2012 International 5-ton dump truck. We are looking to replace that. This truck is starting to suffer from corrosion, just like any of the vehicles at this age that we have in the fleet, because they operate in a harsh environment all the time. The picture on the top right is our 2006 F-350. This one is also succumbing to corrosion. We've made a number of repairs on this truck, to different body panels, and whatnot to keep it to a point where it'll pass state inspection. But we're at a point this year where it's gonna require so much work, and at this point in time, there's just no value in it. So we're looking to replace this truck at a cost of $70,000. And the picture on the lower right is the tires that are currently on our John Deere payloader. These tires at this time are worn. We will likely get through this summer on them. Wouldn't be a big deal if this was a machine that kind of lived in a pit most of its life, but we do use this machine for snow removal So we need to have decent tires on it, so we'll have traction to be able to plow, push, and remove snow. Next page, please. For sidewalks improvements this coming year, we're looking at a couple different areas in town that we'd like to make some improvements on. One is Dock Square. As everyone is probably aware, we have the clay brick down there in most of Dock Square. And due to the salting, due to normal wear and tear, we have some places in the brick sidewalk that's, starting to spall, and we need to make some spot repairs down there in different areas. But the sidewalk that is kind of adjacent to Compliments and runs down toward the coffee shop is probably the worst section. It's heaved in a lot of areas, so the base at this point has just completely deteriorated. So we're looking to replace that entire section of the sidewalk. School Street, we did just get the capital plan from the state, from the DOT. They're gonna come in and they're actually gonna overlay Route 9 from Main Street all the way out to Beechwood Avenue in the coming year. So after we received this information, we kind of, took a look at what we had down there. You may or may not be aware, but the curbing, the sidewalk that we have down there that runs from Main Street up to the school has very little reveal on it left. And when I say reveal, the pavement's within like 2 inches of the top of that. And it should be more like 7 inches. So before the state comes in, we would like to get in and pick up that granite sidewalk and make some improvements on, with the curbing and do what we can with the width down there before the state comes in to overlay, rather than having them overlay and then us going back in and tearing up their work to fix it. So it would be the proper way to take care of it before they come through. Next slide, please.
Question on that.
Sure.
That's between Main Street and the school?
Correct.
And it's $100K to do that length?
Yes, yeah, between, replacing the curbing and picking everything up. And then we'll have to base pave, part of that back in after we've made our cut. So there's a fair amount of work to do in there. So,
Chris,
yes.
these are costs for materials, not labor, correct?
Correct, it's gonna be materials. We also, every year, we do need to rent an excavator to do this work. So part of that is also reflected in there. Obviously, in the process of doing this, we're gonna cut out a section of pavement. And after we get out of there, we're gonna have to base pave that back in, as well as the sidewalk itself. So,
But this is not including any labor costs.
correct. Yes, our crew would be doing this work.
Right.
Right. Yep.
I'm sure they'll take you on, Dan, if you want volunteering.
I do need flaggers every year,
Yeah.
Dan.
We'll put him in the excavator.
What that little machine you can automatically lift?
For road improvements for the coming year, obviously this past year, we did go in and reclaimed Old Cape Road, Beechwood, Pearl Street, and Elm Street. So we're looking to overlay that base pavement this year. West Oak and Lock, for anybody that's been down that section of road out behind us, that's been kind of rapidly deteriorating. We have some drainage issues down there that need to be fixed before we can pave that. So there's some work ahead of time that we need to do before we can, actually reclaim that road. So we're looking for $50,000 to do the drainage work down there. And then Walls District Road, obviously, there's been a lot of discussion on this past year. So we kind of wanted to handle that project in 3 different phases. This year, we'd like to go in and take care of the drainage issues that we have down on Walls District Road. Next year, we would be looking to reclaim and base pave it. And then the following year, we would be looking to overlay that base pavement.
So do you want to just talk about, because some people might wonder, why you pave a road and then the next year you pave the road?
Sure. So the base pavement that goes down is kind of like that structural base. It's a larger aggregate. And because it's a larger aggregate, although it doesn't seem, like it is, the road is actually porous. And the issue with the base pavement is If you leave that too long, it's like anything else, water will get into all those little minute places, freeze, and start to, blow that aggregate apart. And that's when we start to lose the base pavement on the road. So that's why it's customary to go back in with a finish overlay. The aggregate's a lot smaller. So if you can, I guess the easiest way to equate it would be like a coat of wax on a car. You know what I mean? It kind of protects that base pavement. Yeah.
And the cheapest time to fix a road is when it's still in good condition.
That's correct. Yep. Yep. Next slide.
We did sidewalks.
Oh.
So Craig and you are, Craig's gonna come talk about flooding, but
So EMA Director Hat, please. So, we've noticed over the last few years that our storms and situations have started to progress and cause some pretty severe flooding that's not been seen in the past. And to try to manage those areas is becoming increasingly tough, and the periods are longer. I'm just going to start my FEMA hat and start that project because we finally got the presidential declaration for the storm that happened in late December. And we saw some significant flooding in Dock Square and along Ocean Ave. Ocean Ave, we had like 7 to 8 spots that were flooded. And unfortunately, folks don't get the idea that you probably shouldn't drive through that stuff. And it causes us great concern. So to help us out with that, we've asked for some extra help as far as trying to block those areas off to traffic when those situations happen. We've got normal areas in Dyke Road and areas that, are significant issues. But I can't put somebody at every one of those locations. We run out of people. This last storm, I had everybody working, and we were everywhere trying to keep people from making poor decisions. And that's unfortunate, but that's what it comes down to. But we're asking for this $10,000 to buy barricades, signage, and things of that nature to hopefully help us alleviate some of those issues and to be able to use our staff in other places. Thank God we had the fire department because they were at live wires and things of that nature where we should have been, but we had to be babysitting some of these flooded areas to keep people from doing poor things. So that's what this money's all about. Any questions? Thank you.
so you're gonna take a quick break. While Stephanie comes up to talk about park improvements.
Good evening, everyone. For the Parks and Rec Department, I am asking for $20,000. As you know, we are in the process right now of having a master plan done, and we are right in the middle of the process right now. So we don't have any drawings yet. We don't know what's going to be implemented into the parks, but I know that we're going to need some money to start developing that and implementing those things. The $20,000 will be hopefully supplemented with some grants and maybe even donations. But that's what this money will be earmarked for. Anybody have any questions?
So we're hoping our Parks Master Plan will be complete by this summer. And we have had conversations with Tommy McNamara Foundation, for example, who redid the parks over in Lower Village. We do have about $25,000 already in the capital reserve account for parks. So that's an example of an account where we do have some balance that we would add to this, as well as there are state funding for parks as well. And so depending on what the final master plan says, we have some ideas of what they will do, from playgrounds to pickleball courts, for both Firefighters Park as well as Parsons Field. But we wanted to be able to start to implement that plan.
No questions? Okay, thank you.
Okay, so our current solid waste contract's going to expire in August of 2024. And, basically Casella made us aware that, the industry is moving toward an automated pickup. And this is something that obviously as a town, we need to move toward as well. So we're asking for $385,000 for the purchase of 6,200 trash and recycling containers that will work with the new automated trucks. The next slide. Streetlights. So currently we have 105 streetlights in town. The current streetlights are obviously aging out. We can't buy parts for them. They're no longer available. So we need to move toward replacing these, not only for that reason, but certainly for the energy consumption as well. So the fixture that the lighting committee is likely to recommend is going to be the one you see here. It's a Hall of Fame fixture. It's the closest to, kind of what we have right now. We're looking at tackling this over 3 years, so basically do, a third of the street lights every year for the next 3 years to try to get those swapped out. Each of the fixtures, plus the labor to install, is just about $2,300. Next slide. So I'm sure everybody here is familiar with the Wamby Beach area down in front of Walker's Point, as well as the beach on the other side. So the December 23rd storm really did some damage down here. We actually have a culvert in front of Walker's Point that runs underneath Ocean Avenue to the marsh on the backside. And it's not uncommon for us to have to go down there after a storm and remove, a lot of the rock and the debris that gets washed up and covers the culvert. We have to do that so that we can relieve the water on the other side in the marsh to let it flow back out to the ocean. This last storm, in the process of unplugging that culvert, the culvert was actually heaved up. We ended up having to remove that one section of culvert closest to the ocean. In doing so, we found it was completely rotted. It's an old galvanized 30-inch culvert. And, of course, the rest of it is of the same age. And what we can see of it right now, it's in similar condition. So this is one of those areas that we need to address and replace that. So we're looking for $100,000 for the engineering for this. We don't know what that new design would look like. It might be a box culvert of some type like we have down on Ocean Avenue now. But we're looking for the $100,000 to take care of the engineering for that this year.
But it's not just this side, but it's also.
The other side. So the Wamby Beach area, the parking area there, took it really hard in that storm. A lot of the aggregate there will actually wash across the street and into the marsh. Several of those large rocks that are down there to armor that were moved in that storm. So I think we need to look at armoring that more than it already is, and possibly bringing up the roadway some there at the same time as well.
So Chris, you're talking about doing the Wamby Beach and the beach in front of the entrance to Walker's Point?
Yes.
Because that's what you have up here, correct?
Correct.
Okay.
The engineering for that.
The engineering, yes.
Yes, the engineering, yes.
Yep.
Okay.
Chris, when would the implementation be then?
Well, we would have to go out first, to request a proposal.
Okay.
And then after we selected a firm, I don't know what the design time would be. I wouldn't suspect it would be all that long. But, certainly we'd be looking to, at that point, see what that cost is going to be. And from there, we'd have to determine how we were going to fund that.
If we're really lucky, Mary Beth, we could squeeze the state for some money. But don't keep your fingers crossed for that.
Chris, I would love to see some kind of signage at Wamby Beach showing the picture of the Wamby up on the rocks.
So
And
I've already been working with Tom Bradbury on that, and we have a design, but we're waiting for approval because it would actually be installed on the Walker Point Estate property. but we are getting close.
But for those of us that are baby boomers, show the Wambi, but then also show the boiler that used to sit there after the Wambi was gone. Because that's my memory of that big.
It's still there, you just can't see it anymore.
Well, they cut up some pieces.
I didn't know you were that old.
I'm that old. So don't just do the ship, do the boiler.
But I'll bet two-thirds of the people in town haven't a clue what we're talking about.
I know.
I know, absolutely right.
So in terms of the repairs, though, we made there after the December 23rd storm, do you just want to talk about how long you think those might last?
So, you know, I think it is a Band-Aid fix for now, you know, because of the condition that the culverts are in. Obviously, if we have another storm, you know, we'll be down there to redo that. We're actually having a hard time right now trying to find a piece of, an adapter rather, that we can go from a galvanized culvert to a plastic culvert, so we can just put that last one section in. You know, it is one of those things that'll have to be addressed. It's not a dire an emergency right now. We have the ability to go down and clean it out as needed. But obviously, we need a long-term fix for it, so.
Chris, I have a question, going back to the waste collection.
Yes.
And the bins. What happens after we buy the bins and they're given out to the townspeople? What happens if somebody needs a replacement? Do they pay for it, or does the town continue to pay for it?
At this point in time, probably what we're going to do is we're going to stock some replacement parts for these. You know, lids happen to be one of those items on the cans that get damaged often. Wheels. It's not usually the container itself. So we would probably stock some spare parts that we could, you know, fix those containers. So, you know, we would, to me, it would look like we would bring another container down, swap it out, bring this one back, and then we would repair it when we had time. You know what I mean? And then that would go back out into the inventory, you know, at a later date.
So the waste baskets or waste cans actually will continue to belong to the town?
Yes, yeah.
And what happens if somebody runs one over or something? Do they pay for the replacement, or this?
Well,
Probably a Board of Selectmen decision.
That's, that's
That's
why
not
I
Chris's.
wanted to bring it up before we went ahead.
Chris, one question I do have, will these be RFID chipped?
I don't know if these will be chipped, but they'll have serial numbers at the least. And so we have a new work order system that's going in now, and we can actually track these cans in that work order system and actually geolocate them to a piece of property if we want to.
Good.
Yes.
This is for the trash, but not the recycle
No,
aspect?
this will also be for the recycling as
So
well.
there'll be a separate bin for the recycle?
Correct, yep.
Okay, and again, the two-color format?
Yes.
In terms of how this, the method that Casella is adopting, is that the only style of automatic lift and removal? Or is there, are there other types that are being developed?
So from what I understand, it's kind of an industry standard. You
Okay.
know, so these cans are designed to an industry standard, you know, and they would be, you know, purchasing those style trucks.
Okay, thank you.
So, go ahead.
Chris, I have two questions. The streetlights,
Yes.
$80,000, is that per year for the next 3 years, or is that $80,000 for all 3 years?
No, that would be per year for the next 3 years.
Per year for the next 3 years, okay.
Yes, yep.
And my other question is there any reason why we can't buy half the bins, half the trash bins this year, and half of them in the next budget? 'Cause that
Sure.
would reduce the tax rate a considerable amount.
Yes, our concern is the lead time. You know, because that contract would be expiring in August of '24. So if I'm not placing that order for that next half of the cans until July, we may not have those cans in time.
But
for that
couldn't you place the order without paying for them?
Well, we can't make a commitment without approval, and we wouldn't get approval. And I got to sign a piece of paper saying I'm going to pay it, and if I don't have the money authorized, I can't do that.
Right,
All right.
okay.
So I have a question. So each household is gonna get one container for trash and another container for recyclables?
Correct.
Now, is that gonna be enough for a large household, or can they buy another one? What's,
Well, I think that's something that we could have a discussion on. You know, the cans are, I think I priced, it was a 62-gallon ones that we priced. So it's a fairly substantial can. Yeah, it's a good-sized can. You know, I think we're gonna run into this because obviously we will have, you know, accessory dwellings on the same property. You know, and I think that's a discussion we can have as to how you folks would like to handle that, but.
all right, thank you.
Quick question, going back to the sidewalk improvements.
Yes.
Obviously not for this budget year, as things are tight, but for future capital plans, are there expectations around any expansion in specific high-traffic areas?
Yeah, I think, you know, we'll look at these projects, you know, and where they are. You know, if we try to expand, you know, anything, there's gonna be impacts, you know, to property owners. We kind of just went through this on the Walls District Road project, you know, and the feedback that we got from that. You know, and I think it makes sense to have those expansions where we can do that and there's minimal impacts, you know, to the residents. But, you know, as you know, these roads were all built and designed, you know, in the 20s, 30s, and of course, it doesn't support expansion everywhere.
Yeah,
So.
no, I just think about, because I appreciate the work that you guys are gonna be doing on School Street during the tourist season, watching people walking on the street as cars are going by, as people are riding their bikes. It just seems that every year it's gotten a little tighter.
Mm-hmm.
And obviously, we don't want any accidents. We don't want people putting themselves in harm's way, and you
Sure.
know, just God forbid. So
Cape Porpoise, Route 9 comes to mind on that.
yeah,
Yep.
yeah, exactly.
Yep. Any other questions?
I don't have a question for Chris, but just to go back to what April said, is there not a way to split it over the 2 years if it's coming from capital? Can't we, I mean, just as we were building, you know,
But we need to have approval for it before we could place the order. As Lori says, she can't sign a purchase order without the funds available.
So it is something that Chris and I talked about. I mean, it's not something, you know, putting $400,000 in this
exactly.
budget
No,
of bins
I know
is
that.
not something that made me happy. It started at 300, and then with price increases, it went to 385. So the issue we have is that we need to start the RFP process now, because it takes that long for them to order the trucks, et cetera, for the new contract. And the issue is, if I don't have approval until the third week of June, and I can't sign a contract in that fiscal year because of other auditing and accounting standards, I have to wait till July 1, when those funds were appropriated for, that I won't have them probably in time, because I have to get in and I have to make sure we can deliver them if we're going to start September 1st, per se. So, you know, we can do anything you want to do. I'm just saying, I don't know that we will be able to make it happen in the way people would like. And so it's going to be very challenging to go to this new system as it is. And there's going to be a lot of public education effort. And so I'm just trying to make it a smoother process by knowing that we will possibly have the funds to do it, rather than adding another obstacle in our way.
I just gotta ask. Just one more question. It's out of left bank here, but, or left field. Would Casella ever work with the town? I mean, is it, given everything Lori just said, you know, it is a big education, it's, I assume they're buying trucks. Is it something that we would work with them to put in over the course of 2 years? And so we would do maybe one part of the town for the first year in '24, and then the second part of the town for '25?
So we have had some initial discussions, not necessarily specifically that topic, but, you know, Casella did let us know that they likely wouldn't bid on a contract unless we went to an automated pickup. You know, just like everybody else, you know, they're dealing with the same labor pool. Labor is an issue. They're having a hard time finding labor. But, you know, more profoundly would be the safety aspect, you know, when you have somebody that's riding on the back of a truck, you know, in inclement weather. So they're looking to move away from that and move away from it as quickly as possible. I did have a discussion with them about a month ago. They are in the same position that we are in ordering trucks for the highway department. Lead times are ridiculous right now on trucks. They're anywhere from a year to 18 months for these trucks, because they're not only ordering a truck, but they have to order a body from a manufacturer as well. So that kind of adds to their lead time. So, you know, all of these kind of factors come to play, and, you know, I don't know what their truck replacement schedule is, but, you know, they're looking to make that commitment and move to the automated pickup only, so. Yes.
I'm not sure if this is the time to ask this question, how far along we are with it, but is Casella going to be the only bidder?
No, I would say likely we'll have a couple. You know, it's more likely going to be Casella and probably Waste Management, I would say, that would bid on it.
Maybe we could get one of the two to buy a year's, half of the bins for us, and when we sign the contract, and we'll pay them back the next year with 5% or something. There might be a creative way to look at this, given the chunk that we've got to bite off in order to meet their needs and their demands. So maybe something we could try to work with.
Yeah, they might have trouble with getting the trucks, you know, there might be so.
Yeah, we already know they're going to have a hard time getting the trucks.
I'd hate to be sitting here with 6,200 bins and not have a truck to pick them up, so, something to look at, huh?
Yes.
Right, and paid for them all.
Got a couple of them.
Yeah.
Any other questions?
Thank you, Chris.
So Dave, can you go to the next slide? So the next two have to deal with the reserve for the piers. And so we have a funding in here for a hoist replacement. The hoists go through a lot, and we need to know that we have funding available to replace one. And then we also have 100,000 at the next slide set aside for our Cape Porpoise Pier project. We have 2.1 million in EDA funding. We have been secured additionally 500,000 in Maine DOT funding. And so we're very, very thankful, but with the bid, we haven't put it out to bid yet, and so we're not sure what the price is going to be. And so we want to make sure we have enough funding in place in case there are cost overruns or because the bids come way in over budget. So we've we also had some repairs we needed to make because of the December 23rd storm. So that took from some of the reserves we had at both Government Wharf as well as Cape Porpoise Pier. So the 100,000 certainly will stay in reserves if it's not needed, but we're trying to hedge our bets and prevent us having to have a special town meeting if those bids come in over budget. Any questions on that? So with that, I will move to our town committee and social service agencies. So on page 75 is our Conservation Commission. and that's under your general government tab. And the Conservation Commission has asked for approximately $5,200 this year. And they are doing a lot of work on pesticide ordinance, as well as pollinators and education in the community. And so this year, they really want to focus on a water testing program for pesticides, both in Kennebunk River as well as Cape Porpoise Harbor and at Goose Rocks Beach. And what this would be a program where they test it 4 different times during the season. And they send those results off, and the results come back and give us a baseline and a benchmark on what chemicals that they find in each one of these water bodies as a starting point to understand whether there is a pesticide impact in different water bodies. So that is their request. Next, we have, you have the CHEMS presentation, Dave. We have Jim Stockman, I believe, and Joe Carroll from CHEMS. Hi, Jim.
Good evening.
And so on page 115 is where the CHEMS budget is.
I'm Jim Stockman. I am the chair of CHEMS, of the board. And the first slide, at the bottom of it, we're asking for $250,000. An appropriation because CHEMS is the local nonprofit ambulance service, and we are in our 44th year of operation here in the town. Very quickly, you can see the members of our board, which is a volunteer board, and our operations staff. Some of the discussions earlier when Chief Everett was up talking about going to per diem, CHEMS went through that route a number of years ago. CHEMS started out as a totally volunteer organization and is now completely payroll driven. If I could have the next slide, please. So I wanted to be able to educate the new board members, both on the budget board and on the selectmen side of the table, to what we're about for CHEMS. So this is showing you our typical rates. It's showing the 3 classifications of our service: basic life support, advanced life support, cardiac life support. I have an example of what it might cost, and payment is usually covered by 3 sources: government programs, patient's insurance, and of course out of pocket by the patient. Next slide, please. Here, CHEMS is regulated heavily by the government. There are very set amounts that will be paid. So on this slide, you can see what Medicare pays. You can see what commercial insurance pays. You can see what CHEMS bills. And so this is very quickly subject to change. So next year, this might be totally different. We don't know that. Some of the recent programs that CHEMS has had to absorb at the state level is that we now have to offer a retirement plan to our employees. But CHEMS is not making any financial contribution to that program. But we did have to add money in our budget to set up the program, and once one of our employees elects to join that program, it's costing CHEMS $6 a month to maintain that employee. The other state mandated program is paid time off. The next slide, please. I thought that it would be important for you to see the demographics of a calendar year, the number of calls that we've had. Also notice the age distribution of those calls. Obviously, at age 65 is the 50%. Through a program, the government is now requiring CHEMS to keep absolutely accurate information about the number of hours, where the ambulance went, what was the cost, and we had to do that for a full year. And at the end of this fiscal year, that's when we will be handing in our data, and we will have that for everybody sometime next year to show you the details. The reason the government is looking at this is because CHEMS, like every other ambulance agency in the country, is in the same situation. I was just with somebody for lunch today. They came from Camden, and they're having a discussion of whether they join a regional group or whether they do it by themselves or whether they get a commercial company in to do it. We're all in the same situation. If you've read the paper recently or seen the TV, you would see that there is a task force trying to figure out how to make an ambulance service viable. We've been told that it would take us 2,000 calls to make us profitable. And many ambulance companies, maybe private ambulance companies, are going under because they can't make it on what the government pays, et cetera. So this is not just us. Our problem is that we have some money in the bank. But we're, as you'll see later, dipping into it quickly. Next slide, please. Notice the purple variables. These are the variables that we do not know, and through a guesstimate, we're trying to come up with a budget. The variable is that we don't know how many calls we're going to have in a calendar year. The variable is we don't know how fast we can collect that money. We can go 30, 60, 90, 120 days. We turn it over to collection, and we lose 30% of that money to the collection agency. Notice also that there is a percent of non-billable calls versus the billable. CHEMS only bills when we take you from point A, Kennebunkport, to point B, a hospital locally. That's the only time. We do not charge for when the ambulance returns. It's only the mileage from point A to point B. So consequently, that red area there, services might include a lift assist, a public assist, certainly support of the fire department and the police department and other public agencies. Could be the Coast Guard, could be Marine Patrol, who knows? We could provide medical service. We can provide well-being checks. We're unique in Kennebunkport because we have one of the few public health departments. So CHEMS works with the fire department and the public health department and the police department in order to help out when needed. The problem is those are non-billable. I still have a crew back at Cape Porpoise in that fire station, 24/7, ready to go. Next slide, please. So this is an example of what it might cost, and you can see the different out-of-pocket versus state and federal programs versus what the patient insurance pays. And one of the things that CHEMS wants to do is to try to get money to flatten out our cash flow. We need the money, the bills come in, and our employees need to be paid. And so consequently, if somebody was looking at this slide, you can see the percents. Now, in order to help, CHEMS came up with four years ago a new program called a subscription service. We go out for donations. We used to go out every July for donations. We're now going out in October and April. So we've changed, trying to get additional funds. one of the things we offered was a subscription service. And what that means is that for a set amount of money you give us up front, we'll take care of, and I'll take the next slide, please. Thank you. And here it is. Notice that the state and federal programs remain the same. The patient's insurance pay remains the same, but out-of-pocket is zero. But you can see our subscription rates, and we haven't raised them in 4 years. This is a bargain. Now, here's what's happening. You can't deduct that. And KEMS gets the money, because we usually start in January, and we do it for a calendar year. And so if you didn't need KEMS at all during that year, we pocketed the money, and we thank you very much. But if you did need us, this is a great bargain. And if we had to go back numerous times, this is an even better bargain. Then it really starts paying. So what we did was we came up with an individual for $150, family of 2, family of 3 or more, seasonal resident, $100 per person. So here is a program, and we need more and more people to subscribe because we get the money, and a typical, for example, this year we've already had 4 calls in which they were subscribers out of maybe 80, 90, 100 responses. But that money that comes in is money that we can pay our bills right now. And we don't have to wait, if you remember the previous slide, 30, 60, 90, 120, or 240 days, because this billing of insurance is crazy. I've been with KEMS now for 8 years on the financial side of it, and first they bill this group for 120 days. Then once that happens, then this group gets billed for 120 days, and eventually that number goes down. Well, wait, 120 and 120, that's a lot of days of not seeing money, but we still need to do our payroll. Next slide, please. This is a schematic of the income for KEMS. Notice the purple variable. Notice that I've added the endowment, that we do have an endowment, and that we're tapping into it. But non-operating revenue from the town, great, $250,000. We thank you. It's probably the only guaranteed money we get, is that money from the town. Everything else is totally variable. Notice the subscription, at 6%. We've been about $35,000. We've been doing really great on our fund drives. We're getting about 10%, but this is the first time we're going to go out in October and April, so we're anxious to see whether that's going to increase our funding, because we need every penny we can. Slide 8, please. This is an example of our expenses. Oh, look what happened. KEMS used to be a volunteer, it's now all payroll. So consequently, the bulk of our money is payroll. And as Chief Everett said, that pool of paramedics and drivers and EMTs, it's shrinking. So we have to be competitive to attract the people and to retain. Slide 9, please. This is KEMS pay scale. And sometimes we could have done this with cost of living and everything, but our chief of operations came up with his crew, but mostly through him, this idea of we do the minimum wage, and that's set by the state. And that's been going up, as you know, each year. So our driver is $1 above the minimum wage. A driver is a driver, does not have any medical credentials. EMT basic, and then you can start seeing it going up. And then the paramedics, what we did to retain the quality of our paramedics, because we need very special paramedics in town. They need to be able to go out, they could be by themselves, and they need to completely function, or they might have a crew, or they might have help from the fire department. And so consequently, we need exceptional paramedics. So what we did was we came up with a longevity method to keep our employees coming back. The next slide, please. I don't know whether you can see it, but this just came across the chief of operations phone. This is a company called United. And if you can see the dollars that they're paying, this is the competition that we're trying to get people and retain people at KEMS. So it's a very competitive, and if the town went per diem for fire and KEMS, we're looking at that kind of rate. Now, am I out of turn here, Chief, in terms of cost? At 24?
Probably not at the medic level, but somewhere in between the AEMT and the medic.
So we're talking a lot of money here. By the way, you can go to McDonald's, and I think they're paying $16 or $17 an hour. So again, we're really looking at this world of competition and retaining our people. Next slide, please. This is a slide I tried to put together to show the trends. And what Lori and all of us have been wrestling with is the fact that we at KEMS have been dipping into our endowment to cover our operational expenses. And this dipping is way above what our financial advisors, H.M. Payson, recommend. So we've been doing 8 to 10%. They want us at 4%. So one of the problems for us is how do we keep our endowment to grow, to meet our expenses, and you can see the lines of the appropriation, the total income, the expenses, and the bottom line, obviously, is what we were taking out of our endowment. So that's the magic of what we need to look at. I probably think that next year we might be back for, instead of 250,000, we're going to be somewhere around 300. Who knows, depending upon our labor costs. But if more people pay us, if more people use our service, these are all the variables. If we get more donations, then we don't have to tip into that. Thank you.
Thank you, Jim.
Thank you, Jim.
Questions?
Jim?
I'll be there shortly.
One of the things that kind of came out in your discussion was regionalizing ambulance service. When we started KEMS, and I think I'm about the only one left who was part of the original crew, we looked at that strongly and tried to figure out, okay, to regionalize it between Arundel, Kennebunk, Kennebunk Port, and where to put the ambulance and its crew. There is no good place to put an ambulance. If you think about the distance from, let's say, downtown Kennebunk to Goose Rocks, and you're having a heart attack, no. Or if you want for the ambulance, get way out to West Kennebunk, no. So the idea of having a centralized, let alone Arundel, I mean, go from there to some of the places in Arundel, and you're having a heart attack. I mean, if you got a nosebleed, big deal. But if you got something serious, there is no single place to even think about putting an ambulance. We went through this, and no. So I hope that continues to be the thinking if people want to get service in a reasonable period of time.
being the historian of Chems and having written its history for the 40th anniversary, I will point out to everybody that Arundel, parts of Arundel were originally in the Chems district.
Yeah.
Because on the board originally was a selectman from Arundel and Kennebunkport. So I'm not sure the timeline of, I could look it up, but there was a point where I have an Arundel selectman on the board, and then all of a sudden I don't, and something happened that it stopped. But to that point, yes, there is a lot of moving parts here to this. There's certainly the discussion with the fire department. There is the discussion with a lot of other people in terms of what is the best and how can we get people there quick enough and still retain maybe a single ambulance, because that's part of the problem.
Yeah.
So I'm just thinking about the resource pool that you talked about. So what does Kennebunk and Arundel do right now? Do they have their own self-serving?
I'm going to ask Chief Carroll, Chief of Operations, to answer that, because he's the one responsible for trying to get the people. If you would, Chief Carroll.
What Mr. Stockman's saying is he's going to put me on the spot, which is fine. So what was your question, ma'am?
So he was talking about the resource pool, and I'm just wondering what Kennebunk and Arundel do right now. Are they hiring their own,
Yes, Kennebunk and Arundel have their own folks. We have our own folks. When he's talking about the resource pool, what he essentially means is there's only so many EMTs, advanced EMTs, and paramedics in the state. Okay? So public service agencies, essentially, we're all picking from the same fruit tree. So I have folks that work for us at Kennebunkport that work in Wells, or they work in Kennebunk, but their full-time job may be in Saco, or Biddeford, or Portland. So us being a per diem service, we get something that a lot of the towns like Saco, Biddeford, Sanford that have full-time departments don't get. We're getting ready-made trained people, so we don't have to absorb that cost. So when Mr. Stockman talks about that resource pool, that's what makes Kennebunkport unique, because if you come down here as a paramedic where everything is widespread, I think Allison said it a long time ago that Kennebunkport is like a 47 square mile mobile nursing home, because we have so many different types of calls. I'm gonna in a nice way.
Allison said that's not trademarked.
Or maybe in a conversation I had with Allison, I said it, but I got you to smile. But anyway, when you come down here and you get a medical call as a paramedic, you have to be ready to stand on your own 2 feet. So when he said we hire certain kinds of paramedics, you don't have help coming. And if your help is coming, it's coming from a long ways away. So those resources, yes, we're all picking from the same pool, but at the end of the day, you get what you pay for. And we really try to not be the highest, not be the lowest, be the most competitive in the middle, and give the best level of service we possibly can. Does that answer your question?
Yep, thanks.
Anybody else?
I don't know about that mobile nursing home.
I'm gonna let that go. I'm not going back to that one.
That was good.
I love it.
Thank you, Joe. Well, speaking of that, it looks like Allison is next on the docket.
No, don't
Yes.
make Allison nervous. Does anybody have any final questions for Chems? Thank you, Jim, for the information. That was excellent.
Thank you.
So, next on our agenda is Health and Welfare Social Service Agencies. It says page 139, that's where it is in our budget. If you also go under your tab that says nonprofit, we went over this the first night of the budget. There is the memo and spreadsheet from the Nonprofit Social Service Agency Subcommittee and their recommendations, and that's what's in your budget. I wasn't gonna go over this in detail. I didn't know if anybody had any questions on that. It's up $1,065 from last year.
And I just want to thank our subcommittee for doing all that work.
So if not, then we'll have Chris Simeone come back up. So we have on page 155 is our shade tree committee. And it's under Public Works. It's considered a Public Works committee. And we have a committee that's been very, very dedicated to shade trees.
Yeah, so just overall, we've been a shade tree community since the sixties. You know, as you see, looking through the budget, there hasn't been any real changes to the budget. You know, this is basically for the maintenance, preservation of the trees here in town that are currently tagged shade trees. I don't know if anybody has any questions.
I'd say the majority of the funding is to save the elms. We continue to do work on that, and then it's about trimming the more visible shade trees within the right-of-way, as well as sometimes that we have to take a tree down.
Yes, yeah.
Okay, so then next on page 161 is the cemetery budget, and we have a very active cemetery committee, although we don't have any active cemeteries.
And for a mobile nursing home, that's really quite something.
So again, you know, no real changes to the budget here either. I don't know if anybody has any questions. No.
Basically, we pay for the mowing of the cemeteries, and we are required by state law to put up flags and designations for all the veterans. We have veterans going back to the Revolutionary War. We have over 80 cemeteries. Most of them are private, on private property, and we are responsible for maintaining and upkeep. And so this amount of money does not begin to repair the many broken gravestones that they come across in a year, but they do their best with the funds to upkeep the cemeteries. So we are going to move to our very patient libraries, who are very vital. And so I'm going to start with Graves Library, Mary Lou Bukovalis. And so on page 169, you will see the request for Graves Library, and after that, the letter and budget from Graves. And here's Mary Lou.
Thank you all for letting me be here tonight. After being flat funded for the past 4 years, we are requesting an increase to our current budget for the following reasons. Like the town, we found it necessary that needing additional staff to help with communications. So social media, our website, and technology are a big part of what we do now. And so to get the word out to anybody interested on what is going on in the library, we hired a full-time person. This is the first ever full-time person. We did that last year. So with that full-time person comes benefits, and so that's one of the reasons. And there were 3 additional hours added to our children's library assistant upstairs. So every year we do our best to be prudent and only ask the town for what we need to keep the library operating and offering over 300 programs and services throughout the year. As you can see by the budget that we submitted, it represents 39% of our budget for the town if approved. It doesn't represent wage increases, but rather that full-time position, the 3 additional hours upstairs, and the general expenses that I mentioned. If you look at the revenue side of our budget, we increased our annual fund drive, our special events, and our book sales. And we will do everything we can to reach said goals. The community room rentals remain the same because most of the time we're offering our space to civic groups, town departments, and nonprofits at no charge. And I'm happy to say that the community room is busy every single day, Monday through Saturday, that we are open. As people move to town, we are sending out a letter welcoming them to town and giving them a coupon for a book in the book sale, thanking them to join the library and take advantage of all the things that we have to offer. Attendance at story time increases every week. We're seeing new families, new retirees, attending programs, workshops, and just spending time with us. Terry Bald, our children's librarian, is able to now go again to the all the schools, and so she goes once a week between the elementary school, consolidated school, C Road School, and to some of the daycares in the area. So she's sort of like the Pied Piper. When she goes to the schools, immediately after she comes back, there's all these families that show up. So it's been almost 3 years that we didn't have any families coming into the library, and so it's so nice to hear the pitter-patter of little feet upstairs. We've been collaborating with as many of the other nonprofits and town departments as we can, pretty much over here. And the Shade Tree Committee, the University of New England, the Senior College, many of the merchants, the climate action groups. Terry and Stephanie have mapped out several programs for the coming months and trying to figure out how to split costs when it comes to having somebody come and do a program. And so I think we've got some really good things ready for that. In 2022, we logged over 5,400 volunteer hours. So those people work the circulation desk, book sale coverage, and helping with programs. Currently, we have over 40 dedicated souls that give their time every week to the library. And in speaking of dedication, Lisanne James, one of our staff members, just celebrated her 25th year with the library. So I just want to say congratulations, Lisanne. So it remains a blast and a blessing to work at such a wonderful community institution, and we are so grateful for all of your support. So I am happy to take any questions that you might have. Yes?
I just want to say my grandchildren go to Story Hour every Friday, and you do a fabulous job. They absolutely love it.
Thank you, April. Thank you. We love seeing them there. Anyone else? No? Come on.
Oh, just add that Mary Lou is also celebrating her 25th
Oh.
year with the library.
Yes.
So-
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mary Lou.
So next, we have Dick Smith, who's representing our Cape Porpoise Library, and that's on page 175. It shows the budget amount, and then following that is the letter and budget for Cape Porpoise Library.
Thank you. Did you get the tri-colored PowerPoint that I sent ahead?
The 50 pages.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
I got the stones that you
Yeah.
sent over.
Oh,
The markings.
Well, the Cape Porpoise Library is very small, but it is quite a happening place. It really is. We've not quite reached the metrics in terms of walk-in patrons that we had pre-COVID. But the mix has changed a little bit. We are doing some things that are attracting some of the younger members of the community, and we're putting more effort into craft days and things like that, more than just the library books and that part of it. It always impresses me how much that little library means to the people of Cape Porpoise. And our library director put out the annual newsletter, which is always the source of donations each year. And I was blown away. She got 34% of those to whom she sent letters sent back a donation.
That's good.
And, you know, that just reinforces to me how much that library means to the folks. So with that, we are actually very happy that this year we are asking for town participation in exactly the same dollar amount that we have had for the past 3 years. Hope we can continue that, but for this year anyway, we have been so successful with our fundraising that we believe that we can maintain our services without asking for an increase of town participation, because many of our costs have gone up. So, any questions?
That's a flat
Thank you.
budget. Good for you.
Thank you, Dick.
Thank you, Dick. If you go to page 179, the next up is our Parsons Way Committee. So Parsons Way, if you don't know, is along Ocean Avenue, basically from Colony Beach down to Walker's Point. It was gifted to the town many, many years ago, and this funding allows us to trim the bushes along there in order to maintain the view corridor, which was part of the gift requirement. As you can see, that cost is going up, and Louise Spang, who's actually on the committee, a descendant of the Parson family, was looking at doing some tree trimming this year as well for the view corridor, but that's basically the funding for that. I don't know if there's any questions there. If you go to page 189, you will see our miscellaneous agencies. So those include Memorial Day. The local American Legion holds the Memorial Day Parade each year, and this is a contribution towards that, as well as, you know, renting a speaker system, et cetera, to make that possible. The Dock Square Monument, so the plantings in the Dock Square Monument are done by our Seacoast Garden Club, and that's volunteer based, and they do a fabulous job at several areas in both Kennebunkport as well as Kennebunk. We do pay for the actual plantings that go in there on a seasonal basis. The 4th of July fireworks, those are a split cost with Kennebunk. And Kennebunk actually signs the contract, and so we split the cost half and half. These other two contributions are part of the nonprofit request as well. One is to Southern Maine Veterans Memorial, where they do have an entire cemetery dedicated to veterans. And Senior Center in Lower Village, which supplies services and programs for senior citizens, and we contribute to that as well. Are there any questions on any of those? So at this point, we have run through the entire budget. I think we've supplied everything that people have brought up to prior to this. So, you know, we're looking for any feedback on the budget, any other outstanding items that people are seeking.
I think it's a great budget. I think you've done an excellent, your team's done an excellent job, and I can't say anything better than that.
Easy to understand, Laurie.
Very much.
This process has gotten a lot easier in the 10 years that I've been sitting over here. Yeah. I remember the very first time I saw the budget, I was running for this seat, and I left and said, what the hell have I gotten myself into? But this is much better process, both visually and, you know, the process by which it gets to us has been streamlined a great deal, and I commend you and your staff, Laurie. Yeah, absolutely.
Laurie, I just have a question, a couple of them. So on the wage increases, are the majority or all of them mandated by contracts? Or how should we look at them across all the department heads?
So we are in the final year of a 3-year contract in our union, and it's a 3% wage increase. And so in the past, the non-union staff have received a similar wage increase to the union.
And then you had provided us with your team the overage, so the great explanation, again, the general fund, the 18%, and then, then the feed into the capital fund, and then, how the capital fund is utilized. But when I was reading through, you started the statement of the strategy of the town is, to build up that capital, to incur all the the projects and capital outlays in the future that all the, department heads have spoken about. My question is, do you have an idea, or can you share with us what that growth looks like? Because you've mentioned in the past how some of the transition funds or general funds, you sort of pulled them back. So in essence, there's more going to the capital fund by default. So what's the town's plan on, or that outlook for that capital fund to get to?
You mean in terms of the capital reserve balance?
Yep.
I think one of the challenges is that we've really seen over the last couple of years has been these sharp increases in costs, and certainly those have impacted capital budgets more. As I stated in the beginning, I was hoping to draw down the amount of capital fund contribution this year, but the fact that we had ARPA funds last year and our capital budget did not decrease, it stayed fairly same, a little higher at 60,000 more. I recommended the capital fund contribution that we have. As I said, we have 1.117 million in there right now. Based on how this fiscal year ends, we'll see, what that contribution to that fund is. But I would certainly like to see the town be able to keep at least $1 million in that fund, because that's the fund we would go to if something came up during the middle of the year and we needed a special town meeting to deal with something. Certainly, if we've been using the reserve funds as well as a way to plan for those. So like those large fire apparatus, replacements are a good example of that. We also use the Kittredge funds and the CV funds as part of those fire truck replacement schedule. I think what I'm seeing is that's really throwing a rock in the road for us is some of these sea level rise issues with our infrastructure. And so we've been fortunate with Cape Porpoise Pier and Causeway to receive grant funds, and we'll certainly continue. And some of this design work and engineering work is to poise us for any continued grant funds, either from the feds or the states, so that we would be ready to apply. But it's really unknown as to what that funding level might look like in the future. And in that case, we probably ought to be building that fund up even greater.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Thank you.
So is there a methodology as far as when you put in the capital improvement plan versus bonding? Can you just talk a little bit to that, I know it's a tough thing.
Right,
a juggling act.
Certainly, anytime you bond, you never want to bond for something that's not going to last the life of the bond. And so, Kennebunk Port, I've been in places where they bond every year. It's part of the capital improvement plan. And the City of Auburn bonding, was a normal part of the budget process. When I came to Kennebunk Port, people explained to me that they like to save up for projects and not bond them. And so we have done a little of both. We have, the Parks and Rec building, the police building are examples where we had some reserve funds go into them and some longer-term 10-year bond. So in terms of like the wastewater projects, for example, we did a $6 million bond. And that's an example where I think if we couldn't have gotten the funding for Pier Road Causeway, that would have been a bonded project. Ocean Avenue Seawall at $1 million was a bond project. I think when a project in itself reaches that $1 million or higher level, that's probably likely for a bond, because it's at that extent that it probably should be shared over more parties than just the ones here today to help fund it. But it's somewhat of a cultural, in terms of your community and how they feel about it. We did the lease purchase on the ladder truck for the last 500,000. The town does not have a lot of lease purchase accounts because it's not something they funded, whereas Denise Brown, our previous finance director in the city of Gardner, they do lease purchase for a whole bunch of things. And so it's really about kind of the tolerance of the community, because you're really putting that cost off into the future and counting on that there's not going to be more demands there as well.
Like I said, I've seen it both ways in
Yep.
other towns.
Yep.
But sometimes by bonding, you're letting future people move in, pay for it
Right.
versus the people are sitting here today.
We've also bonded when we had emergency or when we had unique opportunities that wouldn't allow us to wait to town meeting. For instance, purchasing the property across the street, $10 million. We had a special town meeting and we bonded because there wasn't time. Well, first of all, it was $10 million, but second of all, time was of the essence to make that deal happen.
But in terms of this capital, I mean, I don't think design and engineering money would be bonded. I don't think most of the vehicles we're purchasing would be good for bonded. The large public works vehicle, might fit into that category, that it might make sense to bond. I think it's really those roads, is where I would look if I was going to take something out over a longer period of time.
Because bond rates still are relatively not too bad.
Yeah, they aren't,
So
compared to the interest rates out there.
a few
yeah.
years ago,
Yeah,
it was
yeah.
horrible.
Laurie, we aren't putting any reserve for highway trucks and what have you, are we? I don't,
We have not been putting them in reserve, no.
shouldn't we consider that for the future? Because we're looking at some pretty
Yeah.
expensive pieces of equipment.
Yep,
Put $50,000 a year in, or some number.
yep. I think that we've been fairly consistent with our funding
Right.
on vehicles.
Right.
With highway, and I agree, it'd be nice to have a reserve fund set aside for them. But it's been about choices each and every year and about priorities, and so, but certainly we're open to any of those alternatives.
But to understand, something would have to give at that level to offset it, right? I mean, that would have to be money from taxes into that capital, right?
Or just up the tax a penny or two.
Well, like I said,
I mean, eventually you're gonna have to pay for it.
Not this year.
Well, maybe, Dan, in your estate planning, you can leave us some money, like the Kittredges did, and we'll name the trucks after you. After you and Sarah.
And a different color.
Yeah, exactly.
You're such a help.
Yeah.
So my question is, now that the presentations have all been done, at what point are we going to talk about any changes or looking at something that we may want to, like the buckets, the trash cans, and come up with maybe some kind of creative plan so that we don't have to take that hit all at once? Or pay for them out of a different fund, if we have a fund that's sitting there waiting to be spent, or, because I hate to see a 29% tax increase.
Well, I would say that we are looking for direction. So if the Board of Selectmen and Budget Board are saying, we want you to come back with a different proposal, we're looking for some input on that, or what you see our priorities. So you see that capital is a big driver in this budget, but where are the priorities of the town is my question.
You know, in the past, when I was first a selectman, the roads weren't being taken care of. And all of a sudden, they're falling apart, and the next thing you know, we had to go ahead and capitalize that and spend $1 million each year. And now our roads are in relatively pretty good shape. So you're either gonna pay a little now, or you're gonna pay a lot later on. It's up to you guys. Take your choice.
The sewer department is a perfect example of that.
Absolutely. Yes. And I think that, personally, I think this is a well-put-together budget. I really do.
I agree. I mean, there's nothing, the operating side of the budget, there's nothing I would take out. And even capital, I mean, where would you take anything out? Roads is the only big expense, and I think we should be paving our roads. I mean, I don't want to drive through potholes. The only other option is to try to raise some revenue someplace. And that would be under your prerogative, not ours. We couldn't tell you what to do, but, I mean, if we did raise some revenue, that could decrease the mill rate. The only two places that I can think of that could be a significant increase, or that would make a difference, would be Dock Square parking lot fees or Goose Rock's beach parking stickers. I mean, those are two places where we have fairly significant revenue.
Dimitri's usually pretty quiet, but he's down there shaking his head.
Uh-oh. I mean, we haven't raised the rates at the Dock Square parking lot in a long time.
Yes, we have,
When?
just a couple of years ago.
We did it the COVID year. We did it, we went from $3 to $4 an hour.
And $4 is.
And we gave them a mask.
Yeah,
There you
really.
go, enjoy yourself.
I mean, how much would $1, if we raised the rate $1, how much would that bring in for revenue?
Well, keep in mind, that would be in the Dock Square account, and that would not impact
It's an
your tax
enterprise
dollar.
fund, not.
Right,
So-
but we transfer money from
We
that
do,
fund
we
into
do.
our budget.
Yep. I mean, so how much would that increase? I would say you would probably increase it by $50,000.
That's it?
It could be higher than that, but it depends on the transaction level.
Depends on how high the tides are gonna be.
Yeah, I know.
I mean, if we look at revenue, I did give you the building permit fees. There were questions about our building permit fees and where they were in comparison to everyone else. Werner did look at if we raised fees from $10 per thousand of project value to $12 per thousand. Werner and I looked at what that potentially would increase, and we thought it might be $90,000 a year. Depending on the building level and who applies for a building permit, which we're not, Jim Stone was talking about variables, that's a big variable out there.
Right.
We did look at parking violations. We looked at if we increased fees by $10, we could potentially take in another $20,000. So like the beach would go from, what was it, cheap, $50 to $60, and downtown was,
So when we went through that exercise, it was an extra $10 on the fine for Goose Rocks Beach, we would take it from 50 to 60, and then all other violations would go from 28.30 to like 48. We increased it by $20 to like 48.30 or something to that effect, just under $50 for
I
any
thought it
other
was
kind.
28 to 38. We're gonna go up $20.
Yeah, $20.
So some of that depends on, you can bill people, but they have to pay. We do have a new system that's been, I think, better at collecting. We went to the passport system, so it bills them automatically as the ticket is issued. We looked at Goose Rock's beach stickers, And if we raised resident stickers from $5 to $10 apiece, now keep in mind, that would not be for this summer.
Right.
That's next year,
This is-
so you're
these have
talking.
already been set for this year.
Summer of '24. And we went, and daily stickers right now are $25, and if it went to $30, you could raise potentially $50,000 there. And I'm just throwing these out. That doesn't mean that this is the right number or a good idea, Sheila. The other thing we did talk about was the gutter project on the police and public health building. That's $15,000. We did not include a pick-of-it transfer for that. We only did for the grinder pump and the hard drive for the cruiser. But we could do a pick-of-it transfer for that as well, since that is related to public health and police. So that would be another $15,000. Those were revenue ideas that we tried to come up with after our last two conversations.
I see Mike Weston has his virtual hand up. Mike, do you want to say something?
I do. I'd like to say a couple of things. The first thing is that I want to commend the department heads and the town management for the excellent presentation of the budgets. And I understand the desire to find ways that we can cut expenses or keep the taxes down, et cetera, et cetera. But, you know, one of the things that I've been here for 24 years, and one of the things that has happened here is that we have kicked the can down the road so many times. And that's why we ended up with a $6 million problem with the sewer and all the things that we've got to replace over the next number of years. And we have others as well. But I'd just like to, as you're going through and asking for either adjustments or whatever, and I support that, I'm not criticizing that at all. Just keep in mind that in fiscal year 22, our tax rate was $9.60. Right now, it's at $6. We are the lowest mill rate in York County and maybe even the lowest rate in the state of Maine. I'm not sure about that last piece, but I am sure that we are the lowest mill rate in York County. And so a lot of people have said that's because of revaluation, et cetera, et cetera. But I'd like to say that I got some numbers today from our ever-present statisticians in the town hall, and because I asked the questions, and in this decrease from $9.60 to $6 mill rate, 1,178 properties in town got lower taxes. 293 properties ended up with the same. The other thing that stuck out was that if your property was revalued at up to 60% increase in revaluation, you had no increase in taxes. So one of the things you can say about, well, yeah, it's reval, but that's a state requirement that we had to do. We had to reval. The state was already valuing us higher than we were valuing ourselves. So we did that. A lot of it, too, is contributed by all the new building and all the reconstruction that is going on in some of the existing houses in town. So if you take a look at it, just want you to consider that we have a $6 tax rate. And so many people got reduced tax rate, that reduced taxes, reduced tax rate, that I don't think that when I've looked at the budget, and I've done budgets forever in the corporate world, the impact of this budget on the taxpayers of town, while they may increase slightly, is not a burden that we cannot afford. So anyway, I just want you to consider that as you're thinking about this. I'm not criticizing, I'm not advising, I'm just saying these are the facts. That's it.
Thank you.
I'm going back to, yep.
So I think those were really good comments. I do feel, though, that, when April brought that thing up and then John, came up with another idea too, that we really seriously have to look into the container side of it, and is there a different way, to come across? Because that, as April pointed out, that would be a significant, a substantial.
It'll be almost 6 cents.
Yeah. And I think, because, it's something we have to do, but as John pointed out, shame on us if we have 3,000 containers sitting around, and we haven't worked out all the, I don't know if there's enough time with what Chris has been working
That's
with.
really going to be the concern. I know, and I kind of kicked myself a little bit bringing it up because, to be honest with you, I know that Chris and Lori have been pursuing this and trying to find every angle they can take. I mean, certainly something we could look at in the short term, but to bank on it, I think would be difficult. There's
I think
a lot to put
that
in
next
place.
conversation, because I think when Chris was speaking, which wasn't crystal clear, is, has whoever the provider will be, have they gotten their commitments on time delivery and whatnot, just to make sure, because it is, because of the impact, I think it is worth that's, follow-up to make sure that everything is going to be, come off unhitched or come off clean, if we are going to try to procure those 6,200 containers. I understand what you're saying, John, but I do think that,
I'm afraid it's a little late, but okay, we'll take a look, yep.
well, I think we're looking for a commitment from, the carrier that they can achieve that. And if not, let's have the conversation of, from their side and our side.
The challenge is that the carrier already told us they would make a commitment to us, but they want me to sign a piece of paper to say that, and they will order. But I don't have that appropriation in place either for the new contract or for these bins. I mean, if people don't want to purchase the bins up front, we can do a lease purchase. It'll cost more because we're doing a lease purchase, but there are other funding options available. We could do a 5-year note, pay it off over 5 years.
No.
I'm just telling you, if you don't want to pay it all up front, there are other ways to go around that. and we
This
can
is,
certainly do
this
that.
is penny wise and pound foolish here. We have to have these. These are not negotiable. In the 10 years I've sat on this board, we have had countless discussions. We went through Oceanside, which was a great company that got bought out. And then we're dealing with Casella now, and clearly the future is go to any of our surrounding towns that are full service, Kennebunk, Biddeford, I'm not sure about Wells, but Saco, Scarborough, they all do this. This is the future, and it is going to happen. If, worst case scenario, we buy them and you sit on them for a year. But you have them, because in 2 years, they're not gonna cost you $400,000, they're gonna cost you $600,000.
And just to put something into real numbers, if we saved 6 cents on the tax rate, and I think I've got this right, that would be a difference on let's say a house was valued at $500,000, that would be a $30 a year difference in the tax rate. So we gotta kind of be realistic of what this means in terms of how much of a burden we're putting on people. But, that's these days, that's a beer and a burger. Well, those are expensive. That's lost fire prices, so we should.
Yeah.
But it's, we're not going to put somebody in the poorhouse. So just put it in perspective.
I'm glad I'm good for something. Thanks, Dan. So I have a question. Again, this is my first year here, but I've been on budget boards and school committees before. This is unique to me, being the fact we're in an RSU as far as the school side. My prior town, we ran the school too.
That's because you were lucky.
Well, well, never mind. We owned our schools. But at any rate, with that said, but the school's going to be seeing a large increase because of the state funding in particular, with everything else that's going to actually happen too. We don't know what, other than what you shared with us, right? So As far as the, I don't know how it is here for sure, but as far as when I write my check to pay my taxes, I write a check for both, right? I'm paying the school and everything.
And county.
Yeah, so,
Yeah.
I mean, it's coming out of the same pair of pants in the same pocket, or maybe a different pocket, same pair of pants. So my taxes are gonna be going up, potentially, or the average person's will. So I'm thinking is, don't we need to do a little bit of due diligence to see if we can cut it a little bit in some ways? Now, you put some ideas out as far as the income goes. You might have already had some thoughts about, well, if they say we need to cut this, what's the sacred lamb that can go? I don't know if you had that discussion or not, but can you come back with some of those ideas possibly to us? Or is that too much to ask?
Well, I think the challenge we have is that operationally, you know, when you're a very labor-driven organization, you're looking at cutting people, and if you cut the things that people are doing, you know, you're hurting the service. I think that operationally, I don't have reductions to offer you that are gonna be of any meaning. You've heard all the different things, you've heard the capital. I guess the question is, you know, at the last meeting where we're talking about this budget, you know, we get asked, so what about going around and collecting wood from everybody? I mean, that's what we as staff hear every day, is can you do this, can you do this, can you do this, can you do more? This does not have all the things that people want us to do in it.
Sure.
But it does have the basics of what we've done and what we think people are expecting for us to do and need for us to do. So the question as the budget board and selectmen is, you need to be the conduit back to us and tell us what are priorities for this town? What do you want to see us do or not do? Or in all these capital items, where would you, you know, reduce it? And we've talked about the recycling bins and trash cans, and I hear that. But, I mean, you know, we could do, there was over $1 million in roads when I first had the budget. You know, this is 716,000 in roads. So I've reduced what we're gonna do in roads. And that means that we'll probably be delaying something down the road already. But we could reduce it more. When you get to this point in the budget, it's like, I could cut all day long. But what's that gonna do to the services, and what do you guys deem as important is what we're looking for? Because as soon as that budget gets passed on July 1, I get hit with requests from citizens and boards saying, can we do this, can we do this? And I want to say, did you see that in the budget? Because it wasn't in the budget. But we're doing our best to be as resourceful as we can and be conscientious of that expense. And so I need to hear.
That's a good answer. That's
Yeah.
what I really wanted to hear. I mean, it's, again, I'm just not sure exactly how it works.
So, I mean, like, we could not do the website redesign. Is that gonna stop us from providing services to you? No, we'll have police, we'll have fire, we'll have EMS, right? But that means that communication's gonna be more challenging, and it's something I hear about on a fairly frequent basis.
The website is decimal dust.
Yeah.
It doesn't save money.
It's
And
15,000, wasn't it, something this small?
Right,
Yeah.
like, it's a wash.
We could do
And-
streetlights over 5 years instead of 3 years.
Right.
You know, I'm waiting to hear, you know, what you guys think are important or things that we should try to wait. I'm happy to bring back proposals, but I'm trying to understand what your goal is.
Right. And we should be cognizant that this becomes a very different conversation if we have one incident. You know, one shade tree falls and somebody gets injured, or a phone call gets made and nobody's working with chems, or there's a fire and we can't get folks to show up because we need 2 in and 2 out. I mean, we're one incident away. So as we think about potential of saving 15,000 here or 5,000 there, we should also think about how are we gonna plan for some level of redundancy within the town. I mean, I'm sure you all are aware, like right now, there was a revision downward this Monday of the unemployment numbers. State is at 3.1%. Portland, South Portland Metro is at 2.2. I think this area is at 2.1. There's no one to hire.
Yeah, anybody who wants a job has a job at this point.
There's over 3 jobs per person looking for a job. So we need to be very realistic, and we need to be strategic about the things that we do within the town. And if it's a minor increase, then let's be diligent and let's be honest about why we have the increase. but let's not stomp it out because it's a minor increase. Don't get me wrong, there's nobody who likes money more than me. And I certainly want to save money wherever I can, but we need to spend money for the town to have the appropriate level of services that a town like this is expected to have. The entry point for a home in this town is going to bring folks in who are going to have expectations. And we need to be able to meet those expectations. So, sorry, I digress.
No, you're very, yes.
So I just have a couple points. So I agree with everything that you said, but then I'm also reflecting on a lot of what the department heads had talked about. And I'm going to use what Dimitri just brought up, the 2 in, 2 out. So I feel like as we sit here and we listen to, all the excellent presentations and all the feedback from the town management, we are looking at something. You've talked about capital and the great work that the town has done in shifting to the capital savings and, making sure that we're putting funds away to pay in the future. That's excellent. But I think we've talked a lot about resources, and I think that's what scares me, right? So if somebody said, this is your checkbook, you got to balance it. Right now, I would actually be going down all the little things. Because for me, it was listening to the 2 chiefs speak to the resources. Neither one of them, have exactly what they need. The chief of fire is looking down the scope of changing his business model, which will impact us forever, just as, the CHEMS presentation pointed out. So we're going to be looking at a budget that's going to increase on the labor rate, and the wages is going to take a bigger piece of that pie. And I'm not sure, can we keep all the little things afloat? I don't know, so that's part of the discussion that I thought we would be having. I agree on all the capital discussions. I agree on tree trimming. I agree on all that stuff that would pose any harm or danger to any citizen. But I do think the little things, maybe we have to delay the website. I don't know, but I do think that that's at least worth a conversation.
To me, it's a lot of the little things that make us who we are, too. Again, I go back to numbers. Even if we did the 32 cents, if that were the 30 cents, well, I did 32 on a $500,000 house. That's about $190 a year. Now that's money. That's money. But if it means cutting the website, knocking out money for libraries, for taking away the little things that are all less than $10,000, you start chipping away at the quality of life and who we are. Mm-hmm. So I think it's we've got to be funding the main things. We've got to keep things within reason, but somehow in this day of inflation and everything else we're facing, to ask on a $500,000 assessment, $180 a year raise in taxes to continue who we are and what we represent, I think that's a reasonable trade-off. I would vote for that, personally.
That's about 4 breakfasts at Lower Village for 2 people.
Yeah.
Whoopee.
One steak at Lost Fire.
Yeah. It's probably not anybody in this room's car payment. And I see people buying new cars every day. The problem is that by the time we've seen this budget, it's already been trimmed really hard. I as the chairman, I have the unique opportunity to sit down with Lori every other week, and plus times when I come into the office, we usually talk, and we talk about these things. And I'll ask her how the budget's going, and, well, what are they gonna do? Well, they have their ideas, and all the heads come in, and we all have our wish list, whether we're Board of Selectmen members, or we're Budget Board members, or we're just regular people off the street, we all have our wish lists of the things that we want, but, wants and realities are two different things. And I think this budget is a very good example of reality. I'd say I'd put my seat on it, but I'm not running for reelection, so that's easy for me to say. But I will almost guarantee you that we'll take this budget as it is right here, right now, take it in on the 18th of June, and it will pass. No problem. We will not get any pushback over this, not any significant pushback. There's always somebody out there, but, again, this is my 10th time through this. For some of you, I know that number is much, much higher, but we've come a long way in that 10 years in the process. And maybe in the beginning, I could see where we would have cut things out 8 or 9 years ago when, there was a little more fat in the budget. But, you just look at the other communities around us. Go talk to your friends in Kennebunk. Being a lifelong resident and having gone through the schools, I have a lot of friends in Kennebunk. And take your taxes and multiply them by 2.5. That's what your taxes would be. So my taxes would be almost $6,000. And I know to some people, they wish their taxes were $6,000 in this town. Yes, Dan, yes, but I wish I had your house too, but.
I've only had it for 60 years.
Yes, exactly. Could you afford to buy your house? Because I couldn't afford to buy mine. No. But so we're in a really good situation, and I just ask, all of you to look at it in that way, because when I first came to the board, I had all these great ideas, and I said, I can save the town money, and I can do this, and I can do that. And after a while, you realize, this place is run pretty darn well, and maybe I ought to sit down and shut up and listen to, and I'm not speaking to anyone in particular, but I'm saying, maybe I ought to just listen for a while. No, I'm looking at Dan, but I'm not pointing at Dan.
I'm a retired banker, I'm sorry.
No, it's okay. I like money too. Dave Ramsey is my hero, and I'm proud to say that I've made it all the way through, and I'm debt-free. So I understand that, money means things to people, and that budgets mean things to people, but I think we're in a pretty good situation. And as far as the trash cans, if we don't pay for them this year, we're going to have to pay for them next year. And if we pay for them this year, we don't have to pay for them next year. So.
Get it over with.
Exactly. I want to be able to throw my trash out. So I've said enough. Does anybody on the Board of Selectmen wish to say anything?
I've said all along, this is a perfect budget
Yeah.
this year.
I don't know if that's it's perfect, but I think it's pretty darn good.
It's pretty good.
Yes.
Really an excellent budget. And the team has done a wonderful job putting this together. I'm gonna vote for this budget.
Yep.
I was going to say, the only thing I would say, as far as the trash cans are concerned, we could ask everybody to pay for their own.
Yeah.
Well, then,
And what do you do when they don't pay for them?
well, they don't get their trash picked up. It's simple.
Yeah, I don't think that's a good idea.
Well, it's an alternative.
It
It is.
It is.
I mean, technically, isn't it cheaper just to have it rolled into the budget? I mean,
Yeah.
how much were those cans each?
Yeah.
That's right. So,
I still see people putting out bags in front of their houses.
yeah.
Well,
So
they
they
were
won't
waiting
even,
to.
they won't even buy a $20 trash can at Home Depot. And even in my area, which is a nice area, people put bags out. So we gotta do it and put a proper bin in everybody's yard.
Alan, every place in this town is a nice area.
I know.
I used to live in El Paso. I'll tell you what, every place in this town is a nice area. Of course, it was an army post, but.
So are you looking for us to bring back some recommendations so that the next Thursday night, the Board of Selectmen will vote on their recommendations, and then we will forward those to the Budget Board? But I am happy to bring back recommendations on ways to change the budget. They are not my recommendations. This is my recommended budget.
Right.
I was not happy with this increase, and I sat with it for a long time and looked for ways to do it. And you can ask any one of my staff members, because I was sick for a long time about it. But at some point, I gotta bring you what I see are the priorities for the town. And then it's your job to give us that feedback about, no, Lori, because otherwise, I'm just making decisions in my office alone, and that's not a good way to run the town. And so that's why we go through this process, is to determine where is that balance and where is that right road to meet. And so, we can bring you back, ways to meet a different goal, but I just need to understand if that's what you're asking and what that goal is.
Nope. I hear you, and thank you. You're very passionate about it, and you should be. But maybe about the income stuff you threw out, those kind of things, like with Warner, going up to $12 to increase incomes. At least it shows, maybe not beach pass, I don't know what the magical number is, but it shows the town is trying to do, that would be one that would affect a lot less people. I mean, I got building permits to build my house 3 years ago, and if I wrote a check for $3,000 or $4,500, I would, that's a small piece of the pie of the construction of the house. So, I think maybe that's a good one to look at. And I think you said it was like 90,000 or something like that. That's a sizable amount of money. I mean, I'd rather see that than what we were saying about with, the internet. I mean, the website. I mean, clearly it does need help.
And you understand, Bob, those are the Board of Selectmen's prerogatives to raise those fees.
Sure.
But, and it would take, as I said, as I might as well make it public, I'm not running for reelection, in case you didn't hear that. So, but it will take time for the Board of Selectmen to work their way through those. But if I were to stay, I would certainly say that that is a good thing. And we do visit those issues on a regular basis, not every couple of years we do go through our fees, and it may be time to take a bigger look at some of those.
Just to go a different direction versus cuts.
Yeah.
Right, and that's what I'm saying, that I would rather see some of the fees increase rather than cut anything out of the budget. I don't see any place that I would cut anything out of this budget, other than the trash cans, which just because I don't even want to think about having to go automatic, because I have a way too long of a driveway.
You're gonna have to buy a Jeep to haul your trash.
Oh my gosh, I don't know how I'm gonna get them down
Get
there.
a golf cart.
I have my golf cart, but I don't think those
Tow it
bins are
behind
gonna
it.
fit. Oh,
There you go.
So we all have personal thing. I mean,
Yeah.
I got a parking ticket last year, chief, so.
Yeah.
I did pay it.
Yep.
Unfortunately, I think
Paid
that
it
goes,
before my wife saw it. No, it was downtown by the post office. Anyway, so.
But I would rather see fees go up
Yeah.
in, across the area, different places. I mean, you probably hate the idea of raising the docks, but it doesn't affect the taxpayers.
Yeah.
That's the thing. We get coupons, so it's not affecting the taxpayers. And never have I ever wanted to go someplace and looked up how much it was gonna cost me to park and said, oh, it's gonna cost me $4 to park or $5 to park, I'm not going. I mean, that doesn't happen, so
Well,
I don't
apparently
think
you've
it's.
never been to Kennebunkport.
Yeah. Well, April, you're
And you
preaching
know
to the choir, because I'd run that thing 24/7, and I'd crank it up $2 or $3 an hour.
There you go, see?
Yeah.
I mean, I just think that we could
I'd
do.
park at the Masonic
We could
Lodge.
do that. And when I worked at the town hall for 17 years, I heard people come in and complain, well, I was only 10 minutes late and you charged me an extra, an extra hour. Right, but I never heard anybody come in and complain, what do you mean you're charging $4 an hour? Never. So, I think if it went up $1, it's not gonna affect anything in the long run. And it won't affect the taxpayers. But I'd like to see, if the revenues, I'd love you guys to look at the revenues, because that would really help in defraying the cost of the budget, because I love this budget. I mean, there's nothing I would cut out of it. So That's my thoughts.
Well, I appreciate that, April, as a member of the Board of Selectmen, since we are the ones with the power to do that. It is very helpful to hear from you and the rest of the Budget Board members that, perhaps raising revenues is a good way to proceed going forward.
Instead of cutting.
Yeah, well, exactly. Exactly. Do you guys have anything else tonight before we adjourn?
Anybody else?
So I believe, and Lori will correct me if I'm wrong, next week at our Board of Selectmen meeting, which will just be a selectmen meeting, we will vote on the budget. And then the following week, you guys will vote on the budget. And then the following week, if there needs to be reconciliation, if our budgets aren't the same, we will have a joint meeting. And then we'll hash out our differences.
Okay, so when we meet, not next week, but the week after, are we actually voting the votes that are gonna be in the warrant? No.
I mean, we could, but because we don't know where you'll be, I guess that's hard to do. So I was just gonna have you vote on the budget itself by department.
Okay,
Then we'll have to have you take another warrant vote.
all right, so we're gonna vote twice.
That's 2 weeks.
2 weeks. You're welcome to come here next week and watch us do our selectmen thing and see how we vote. Or you can watch us at home.
There you go.
Yeah, on your couch. I wouldn't blame you if you didn't come. Would you like to, adjourn your board, April?
Oh, do I hear a motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn.
Second. All those in favor? We're
Thank you for
adjourned.
coming out. Board of Selectmen, do I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor? I don't know if Mike's still there. Oh, he raised his hand, yeah.
Aye, yep.
Thank you.
Night, Mike.
Mary Beth?